My name's John Rowe, and today is the 21st of November 2024. And I'm sitting here and I'm trying to work out which story I'm going to tell. And I was dredging through the memory cells. And I remember my wife, when she was alive, had just been to Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic as it is now. And then just after the changes, and the people would come by, and it was a big movement from Eastern Europe. Suddenly they freely could go anywhere. And I picked up a couple of hitchhikers. And I remember I had this story in my head, and I wanted to check that it was, that I got it right. And they added some obvious bits to it. So this is, it's a well-known story. It's the three golden hairs that grandfather all know. And it was, and there was a king, and this is from way back in time when mountains were taller and rivers were deeper and forests were thicker. And there was a king, and being a king, he wasn't that clever. And he was out in the forest, and he'd been hunting, and he got parted from the people he was with, and he was lost in the forest. And he's trying to find his way home, and he sees a hut, and he knocks on the door of the hut. And it's opened by the charcoal burner. Now, the charcoal burner is the poorest man in all of the land. And the king says, charcoal burner, show me my way back to the palace. And charcoal burner said, I'd love to, Your Majesty, but my wife's very ill. She's expecting a baby tonight. Go upstairs and lay down on the clean straw, and I'll take you in the morning. Well, the king wasn't best pleased, but you know, there's moments where you could go to sleep anyway, you didn't care. I mean, the king was used to four-poster beds and feather mattresses and all that sort of thing. But, you know, you could see it was at that moment when he could have slept on a safety pin. And he went up and he's soon snoring away. When there's a howling and a wailing and a screaming. And he looks down through the floorboards, and there's the charcoal burner with a newborn baby boy in his arms. And there are three witches. And the first witch takes the boy in her arms and said, I give this boy the gift of great dangers. And the second witch takes the boy in her arms and said, I give this boy the gift of escaping from those great dangers. And the third witch takes the boy in her arms and said, I give this boy the gift of marrying the newborn daughter of that king that's sleeping upstairs. What? The queen has had a baby girl while I've been away, and she's going to marry the poorest man in all of the land, the son of the poorest man in all of the land. This cannot be possible. Well, the next day he came down, he saw the charcoal burner. He said, charcoal burner, this is no place to bring up a baby boy. Send him to the palace, and he'll be brought up by the servants, and he'll have a good life. And I'll send you a bag of gold. Well, the charcoal burner's baby, bag of gold, baby, bag of gold. Well, the baby will have a better life at the palace. And it is the king after all. And there is the bag of gold involved. So he agreed. So the next day he took showed the king how to get back to the palace. When the king got back to the palace, he turned to his servant, he said, take this bag of gold, give it to the charcoal burner. The charcoal burner will give you a baby in the basket. On the way home, throw it in the river. Well, the servant wasn't best pleased, but again, you take the orders from the king. So he gives the charcoal burner the bag of gold. And he's given the baby in the basket. And on the way home, he's crossing the river by a bridge, and he leans over and he drops the basket with the baby in it into the water, and he goes back and he tells the king he's done exactly as he'd been asked. But as it happened, that basket landed the right way up in the river, and it floated down to the mouth of the river, and there was a fisherman pulling in his nets. And there was the basket, and there was the baby in it, and no harm had come to it. And the fisherman, having no children of his own, brought him up as if he was his own son. Well, years later, the king was riding through his land. Hello, peasants, how are you? Very good, Your Majesty. Hello, story listeners, how are you? Oh, very good, Your Majesty. Fisherman, it's a fine boy you've got there. Is he yours? Not exactly, said the fisherman. For 18 years ago to this very day, I found him floating down the river in a basket, and having no children of my own, I brought him up as if he was my own son. The king said, this is no career for a fine young man. Send him to the palace, and he'll be given a job with the palace guard. Here, I'll write a letter of introduction to the Queen. And he took out parchment, he took out a quill pen, wrote, Dear Queen, this boy is my mortal enemy. When he gets to the palace, cut off his head immediately, signed the King. Wrapped it up, put the King's seal on it. The boy put it in his pocket, thinking he had a letter of introduction. Luckily, it took longer than a day to get to the palace. And that night he came to the hut of the second witch and knocked on the door. Come in, she said, I will. He said, sit down, she said, I will. He said, lay down, she said, I will. He said, go to sleep, she said, oh. As soon as he was asleep, she put a hand in his pocket and pulled out the letter. Dear Queen, this boy is my mortal enemy. When he gets to the palace, cut off his head immediately, signed the King. Impossible, she thought, and this is absolutely true. She took her hand and wiped it across the letter, and all the words fell off. And she wrote in the King's own handwriting, Dear Queen, this is the finest young man I've ever met in all of my life. When he gets to the palace, make sure he marries my daughter immediately. Signed the King. Wrapped out, put back in the boy's pocket, put the King's seal on it. Well, the next day, the boy got to the palace. We could talk about the journey, but then the story would be taken 3 hours, and we've only got a few minutes. And he gives the Queen the letter, and Dear Queen, this boy is the finest young man I've ever met in all of my life. Make sure he marries my daughter immediately, signed the King. She was a bit surprised, but the King was a funny old stick, and if that's what he wanted, that's what should happen. So the boy and the girl are married, but when the King gets back, he's furious. Well, if you're married to my daughter, there's nothing I can do about it, but you must bring me a present. Bring me 3 golden hairs from the head of Grandfather Orno. That's what you want, that's what I'll get. And the boy set off on his journey. And the first place he came to was the river. And there was a ferryman rowing people from one side of the river to the other. And on the way he asked the boy's story, and the boy told him he was going to see Grandfather Orno. I'm glad you're off to see Grandfather Orno, for I've been stuck on this ferry for 5 years. Can you ask him how I can get off? And the boy said he would. And the boy carried on till he came to a city, and the people of that city took him to their king. And their king said, I'm glad you're off to see Grandfather Orno. For through the city used to flow a stream, and if you were very ill and very near death, if you drank from that stream, you'd be well again. But that stream hasn't flowed for 5 years. Can you ask Grandfather Orno how we can get the stream flowing again? The boy said he would. And the boy carried on till he came to a second city, and the people of that city took him to their king, and their king said, I'm glad you're off to see Grandfather Orno. Then the city grows a tree, and that tree used to bear fruit. And if you were very old and very near death, if you ate of that fruit, you'd be young again. But that tree hasn't borne fruit for 5 years. Can you ask him how we can get the fruit going again? How we can get the fruit back in the tree? The boy said he would. The boy carried on till he came to the hut of a third witch. And she asked his business, and she told him. He told her. He said, you come to the right place, for I am the mother of Grandfather Orno, and Grandfather Orno is the son. And in the morning it's a baby, and at midday it's a young man, and in the evening it's an old man. He'll eat anybody, and he'll eat you. You'd better hide under the trough. Well, the boy hid under the trough, and that night the Grandfather Orno came in. Oh, I smell humans. He said, of course you do, dear, says his mother. You've been going round the earth all day. You've been making it incredibly hot, and everybody smells. Now put your head on my lap, let me stroke your long golden hair, go to sleep. As soon as he was asleep, she pulled out one hair, threw it on the floor. Mother, I'm trying to get some sleep. Don't worry, she said. But I was having this dream. I dreamt I was in the city, and in that city grew a tree, and that tree used to bear fruit. And if you were very old and very near death, if you ate of that fruit, you'd be young again. But that tree hasn't borne fruit for 5 years. And I can't get back to sleep until I know how to get the fruit back on the tree, and I can finish the dream. Easy. All you've got to do is take out the snake from around its roots and plant the tree somewhere else. And by that very night, there'll be fruit on the tree. He'd be stuck in Ireland with no snakes, wouldn't he? And so, thank you very much, go to sleep. She went to sleep, stroked his long golden hair. As soon as he pulled out something there, threw it on the floor. Mother, I'm trying to get some sleep. I'm sorry, but I was having this dream. I dreamt I was in a city, and through that city used to flow a stream, and if you were very ill and very near death, if you were drunk from that stream, you'd be well again. But that stream hasn't flowed for 5 years, and I can't get back to sleep until I know how to finish the dream and get the stream flowing. Easy. Go to the spring where it starts. Put your hand down the hole and pull out the toad that's blocking it. And while your hand's down there, clean out all that nasty, mossy stuff as well. And the stream will be flowing again. Thank you very much. He said, go back to sleep. Hardly had he been asleep when she pulls out a third hair and throws on for Mother, I've got a day's work to do tomorrow. Let me get some sleep, she said. I'm sorry, but I was on a ferry. And that ferryman had been stuck on that ferry for 5 years and I can't get back to sleep until I know how to finish the dream and get him off the ferry. Easy, all he's got to do is wait till he's got a passenger, row that passenger across the other side of the river, hand the passenger the oar and step off himself, and the passenger will be stuck just like he is. Now, Mother, let me get some sleep, or I'll eat up that boy that's hiding under the trough. Well, the next day the boy is given the 3 answers and 3 golden hairs. And he sets off on his journey, and by that and he gives the king of the city with the tree as the answer. And by that very night, would you believe it, but there's fruit on the tree. And he's given 6 black horses and a bag of gold. And he comes to the second city. And he gives the king the answer. And by that very night, the stream is flowing. He's given 6 white horses and a bag of silver. And he gets to the ferry, and the ferryman said, what's my answer? He said, I'll tell you on the other side. And he gets off on the other side. And he said, the next passenger you get, row them across the river, hand them the oar, and step off yourself, and they'll be stuck just like you are. And thank you very much, said the ferryman. The boy carries on till he comes to his father-in-law, the king. And the king sees the horses. And he sees the horses, and he sees the gold, and he sees the silver, and he asks where he got them from. And the boy told him all about the water, the stream, that if you were very ill and very near death, if you drunk from that stream, you'd be well again. And tells him all about the tree with the fruit, that if you're very old and very near death, if you ate that fruit, you'd be young again. The king said, I could do with some of that water. I could do with some of that fruit. And he set off on his journey. And the first place he came to was the river. And as far as I know, that king is still rowing for people from one side of the river to the other to this very day.
Brilliant. There were so many ins and outs to this and so many questions, so much. And it held our attention all up to